Okay? Prayer is communicating with God. That's all there is to it, communicating with God. Sounds simple, doesn't it? It sounds simple. Okay? I hope everybody here prays. And I hope when you pray, I hope you pray regularly and not like once in a blue moon. Because that is a barometer for your relationship with God. If you have a husband and wife that don't talk to each other, then I would say there's a problem with that relationship, wouldn't you? And it's the same thing when you have a relationship with God. I mean, the more you talk with God, why would God want to even talk with you if you don't talk to Him? So again, we need to nurture and cultivate that relationship. Debate about prayer. Yeah, there were two pastors one day in a parking lot, and they were having a discussion about prayer. And all of a sudden, the deacon walks up, and the one pastor says, when I do my best praying, he says, I always get down on my knees, I bow my head, I close my eyes, and he said, by golly, that's how I do my best praying. And the next pastor said, no, brother, you're wrong. He said, when I pray, he said, I stand up in respect for God. I hold my arms up in the air. I've got my eyes wide open to the heavens. And he said, by golly, that's how I do my best praying. And then the deacon said, well, I don't know about you guys, but I done my best praying when I was hanging upside down in a well. Some of you just got that. Okay. Well, that's very profound. I said that joke a million times. It's very profound, though, because don't we pray more when we're in trouble? Boy, those prayers get really profound when we're in trouble. But really, there's different prayer stances in the Bible, and so I don't think there's any one stance that's better than another. I've heard all the little stories about the pastor. One pastor was successful, and his wife had to always sew the knees in his pants because he was on his knees to the Lord all the time. And the pastor that wasn't successful, the wife always had to sew the seat of his pants. I don't know if you've heard that one before, but anyway. But Paul said to pray without ceasing. And I think what that means is that wherever we go, whatever we think, whatever we say, whatever we do, we need to be conscious of the fact that God is with us and that His Holy Spirit resides in us. And if we're conscious of that, we're going to be a lot more careful of what we do and think and say, aren't we? So as far as prayer stances go, I don't really think it's a big deal. I would rather see somebody kneeling in prayer. Well, I couldn't see them if they were doing it at home. But I'd rather see them kneeling in prayer at home in private. You know what I'm saying? Or God would rather see that than for someone to do it in front of the whole church because they're trying to do it probably for a show. You know what I'm saying? And we're going to get into this later, but Jesus, when He's talking about prayer, He's saying, don't be like those hypocrites that stand on the street corner and they, get up there and they pray for hours and they start weeping and lamenting and going on and on and on. Thank you. Did everybody get a chance to do the prayer list? So anyway, I don't think there's one prayer stance better than another. I just think that God knows your heart. And so we'll talk more about that later. Let's start with a few questions just to get us thinking a little bit. First of all, what is prayer? Communicating with God. That's kind of an easy one. And why do so many Christians not pray? Yeah, I think that's that's got to be. I don't know if it was I'm trying to think of the Barna statistic, but like 30-something% said they don't pray more than so many times a month or something crazy like that. And I'm like, yeah, that's really goofy. How can you claim to be a Christian? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is a kind of a closed group right now. Let me just say this. When somebody asks you who you are, or if they ask me who I am, the first word that comes out of my mouth is not going to be Baptist. The first word that's going to come out of my mouth is I'm a Christ follower. And if they ask me what kind of a Christ follower, I'm going to tell them I'm a Bible-believing Christ follower. Yeah, and then if they ask me what kind of a Bible-believing Christ follower you are, then I might say, well, doctrinally, I'm Baptist, okay? But so many people, I don't know how they can profess to be a Christian and then leave that component out of prayer. You can't. Yeah. Now, I do believe that there are people that go through periods of backsliding, maybe. Maybe they are angry with God because something happened that they didn't want, and they're going through a lot of anger. You know, I can understand a temporary yeah, even in anger. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, you brought up a good point, but now I saw some hands up. Harry, you had your hand up? Right. Yeah, I mean sometimes it's almost like the spirit's been ripped out of you and you just don't have the unction, you know. Yeah. Art, did you have your hand up? Ah. And you know, that's a very good point because you know we are not a typical Baptist church by no stretch of the imagination. We have people from all different denominations, all mixed up. You know, even though we're Baptist in our teaching, but we have a lot of different people coming from different faith backgrounds, and that's true. They go through a religious ceremony or a diatribe or whatever, and then that's kind of the end of it, you know. And so, very, very interesting. Very good. You know, a good example in the book of Acts would be the fact that there are different levels of faith. You know, some people had more faith than others, and Paul always prayed for more faith. And where you had enough faith to know somehow that you're supposed to pray, some people may have less faith. And they're within a religious system and they're not taught that, and so maybe they don't pray, you know. Yeah, that's a good point. Have you ever been mad at your spouse to where you were so mad at him you didn't talk to him? That was awfully fast. There was no him or hawing around there. Well, you know, when I'm counseling people, I tell them that's actually the worst thing you can do. Because when you pretend that somebody doesn't exist, it's kind of like spiritual murder. And I think, too, if we're mad at God, you know, we might have a tendency to do that, too. Just kind of ignore God and forget that God is there and ignore him, you know. Yeah, I actually view that a different way, though. Yeah. Well, I think honestly, honestly, I think if you look those words up in the Greek, you have to remember what happens when the sun goes down. Oh, the sun goes. No, in the Jewish way of thinking, when the sun is setting or going down, that signifies the next day. Okay, so what I actually believe it's saying is don't let your anger go beyond the next day. Because think about it, sometimes you're so mad you can't make it right. You got to get away from it, or the other person's got to get away from it, and then you've had time to pray, you've had time to think, and then you can get together and make it right. So that's actually the way I view that. But anyway, good answers. Why is prayer important? I think we kind of covered that already. It's communicating with God. It signifies that we have a relationship with God, right? Any other thoughts about that? Everett.
You have to have the two components, so one is with. You can't just pray and not listen to the Scripture. You can't just listen to the Scripture and not pray. It's an incomplete relationship if you're only one is speaking.
So it has to be a two-way communication.
It has to be a two-way communication or it's not accomplishing anything.
Yeah. I like that. Yes. Ooh. And when you do ask, you ask amiss. So we're going to be talking about that because a lot of Christians don't get what they want because they don't ask. And a lot of times, they're asking the wrong way. Yeah, they're asking with the wrong motives, right? So, yeah, we're going to look at that. Can prayer change things, and if so, how? I mean, I know that Harry believes in the sovereignty of God, but I also realize that there is, I don't want to say wiggle room, that's not the word I'm looking for. I believe, though, that God has a perfect will, and I believe that God has a permissive will. And I believe that all of that falls within the parameters of his sovereignty and providence. And, if something horrible, like I just heard, I don't know if, Trelane, if you got the girl's name that Camden texted us today, But yesterday there was a soccer game in Lakeland, and one of the girls had a seizure on the soccer field and died. Yeah, so I know we wanted to pray for that family tonight. Is that what it is, the Bonnie family? Okay. And, just imagine here's your daughter it was an out-of-town game because they were in Lakeland. I don't think she was from Lakeland. I'm not sure now. But anyway, here your kid dies, and it's like that's a horrible thing. And, a lot of horrible things happen. And I don't always think that that's God's will. But God allowed it. Did you hear we're probably going to run out of time here. Let me just bring this up. Have you all heard that the Pope wants to change the Lord's Prayer? Have you not heard that? Yeah, he wants to change the Lord's Prayer because he said that it's misleading because it says, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And his point is, well, God doesn't lead us into temptation anyway. It's the devil that leads us into temptation. So he thinks that the wording is off, okay? But I don't think the wording is off, and I'll tell you why I don't think the wording is off.
I'm not saying God not to lead us in temptation. We automatically know that.
Yeah. I don't like the Pope anyway. Well, our understanding of the translation is wrong. Okay. Our understanding of the translation is wrong. So he wants to change the wording. But here's my thought on it. It is true that the devil is the tempter, right? But when God allows the devil, because God has to allow the devil to be the tempter, then that becomes God's test.
That's exactly what happened with Job.
Yeah. It's not that the devil's in charge, God's in charge. And God's allowing it to happen because God tests. And so the tempting of the devil is God's testing. Yes, Opal.
God tells the devil you can only go so far.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that we're going to see when we get deeper into this topic of prayer and of healing is that the devil has a lot of power. If you go back to the book of Job, he can kill, he can destroy, he can strike disease on people, he can do all kinds of stuff. Yeah. Unbelievably powerful. Yeah. Yeah. And that's why Jude, it says in the book of Jude that even the archangel Michael dared not bring accusation against the devil. That's why we got to be very careful. That's why I don't like it when I hear people say, "Oh, I rebuke Satan and I rebuke that," because that's not within our realm to do that. Okay? We can say, "Jesus Christ rebuke you," but you shouldn't say, "I rebuke you in the name of Christ," because it's not our power, it's his power. So, anyway.